Join as we learn together Chumash for Shabbos, the seventh Torah reading of Parshas Mishpatim, chapter 23, verse 26. Yesterday in the Torah reading, we learned about the promise that Hashem tells them when they come to the land of Israel, when they follow what God tells them, He will remove all illness amongst them and give them the greatest blessings. In contrast, should they, and He's sending the angel before them to protect them. Today we continue with the promises and the blessings that God tells us that will happen when we come to the land of Israel. Verse 26, no woman will in your land miscarry or be barren. Ba'artzecha in your land. Es mispar yamecha amali, I will grant the full count of your days. Rashi, Lesia mishakela. What does the word mishakela mean? Hamapelas nefalim, one who miscarries. Hakiveres espanel, one who buries her children. Kriya mishakela is called a mishakela, a person who doesn't have something or lost, as we see the same word was used by Rivka says, Lama eshkel gam shnechem, why should I lose both of you? Verse 27, Esei mosi ashalech lifanecha, I will send forth my dread before me. Vahamoisi es kol before you, and I will then I will throw confusion amongst all the people. Asher tavi behem, that you will be coming amongst them. And I will make all your enemies flee from you. Vahamoisi, what does the word vahamoisi mean in this case? Comes from the word bewildered, make them confused. As the Targum says, I will make them confused. Any word that has its verb is duplicated at the last letter. So for example, sovav, chokak, where this last letter is double in the verb, then it turns to become a word of not a verb of the future, but a verb of the past. Sometimes that they'll take the double letter and they'll put the vowel of a cholam underneath. Like in our case, vahamoisi, or himamti. Migziris v'hamam gilgal el glosai, v'saboisi, migziris v'savav beisel. Over here, Rashi gives us a few different examples. Where, for example, in our case, comes the word v'hamoisi, I will confuse them, from the word v'hameim galgal el glosai, v'saboisi v'savav beisel. Daloisi dalul v'charvu. Also, again, these different words showing us, and over here it continues with other ones, al kapayim chukisaych, which comes from the word chukigilei, v'smiratzaisi from the word ratzaisi dalim, v'ametargim. However, one can mistakenly translate the word vahamoisi instead of confusion vahamoisi, and he will kill from the word mace, va'ektal, and to kill. Toyahu is making a mistake. She'ilu migizras misa, because if the word vahamoisi was coming from the same root word of death, which means misa, ein hey shala bepatach, then the hey would not be with a patach v'hamoisi, v'loi mem shala mudgashes v'loi menuka b'choilam. And it wouldn't be, the mem wouldn't have a choilam as we see it, vahamoisi would be v'hei mati, and I will then kill. Because then the tav is stressed because it has two tavs that it comes at the letter at the end. One tav is from the root word, you can't say the word death, misa, without having the letter tav in it, and then you have a servant word for servant letter as well. He gives examples. Amarti, Chatasi, Asisi, that comes in the place of two. Technically, it should need three tavs. Two for the root word. Taste, because the word taste, vinasati, is two tavs. And the third one should be there to tell me if it's an action word or not. So what we see over here, that Rashi is proving his point, that vahamoisi doesn't come from the word of death, comes from the word to confuse. Oiref, what does it mean that they will flee from you? Where do I see this? Because the word oiref, that they're going to run away from you, and therefore you'll see only their neck, because they'll turn away to run away from you. Verse 28, V'shalachti es hatzira. How am I going to do this? I will send the hornets ahead of you, es hatzira lefanecha ahead of you, v'gersha es achivi es aknani es achitim lefanecha, and it will drive out the Chivites, the Canaanites, and the Hittites. Es hatzira, what is this tzira? What is this hornet? So Rashi explains, min sheretzaif, it's a type of bird or type of creature which is also, that flies, so therefore it's similar to a bee. And that's why we give it the name hornet. And it would hit them in their eyes. It would blind them in their eyes. And he would put poison in their eyes, and they would die. Being that the tzira, this hornets, did not cross the Jordan together with the Jewish people, it would stand on the other side. So who's it referring to, the Hittites and the Canaanites that it would kill? These are the nations of Sichon and Og, which were on the eastern side of the Jordan River. Therefore, therefore, not unlike in other places where he enumerates all the different 7 nations, but over here he only mentions the Hivites and the Canaanites. Even though these nations are also, that the hornets hit, were also on the other side of the Jordan, meaning on the western side of the Jordan. Shanu Rabbeinu, the rabbis have explained in the tractate of Saita, al svasa yardinam de v'zarka b'maras, that how did it do it? It would stand. Actually, the hornets would not be in the land of Israel, but they would spray their poison onto the other side, and this way it would hit them and blind them. So it would go for a very far distance to be able to hit these nations that were on the other side of the Jordan. But being that the other 5 nations, it doesn't mention, because they were more inland and therefore it didn't affect them. The Torah now continues to tell us of how the conquest of the land of Israel continues. Verse 29, Lo yager reshenu mipanecha, I will not drive them out before you. B'shana echas, from the land of Israel in one single year. Pentia aret shemama, so that the land should not become desolate. V'rabba lecha chayis haaretz, achayis hasada. And the wild animals will then outnumber you, meaning that there should not be any empty homes. Shmama, empty. As Rashi explains, empty of people. You're only a few people. You don't have the ability to fill the entire land. So therefore, slowly but surely, you will eradicate the evil that's there. And there'll be more than you, and you'll have animals overtaking those homes. Then the Torah continues, verse 30, Ma'at ma'at agar Hashenu, I will drive them out before you little by little. Mipanecha, from before you, ad asher tifrev v'nechaltas haaretz, until you will increase and occupy the land. Ad asher tifrev, Rashi explains, tirben, until you have more, lashim prikame pru revu, like you'll multiply. Over here we see also the concept of when one has to eradicate evil. It is a slow process, but that slow process is able to eradicate it, therefore that there shouldn't be left as a vacuum of some other things to come in. Verse 31, V'shati es gevulcha, and I will then set the borders of your borders. Miyam Sufat Yam Plishtim, from the Sea of Reeds until the Sea of the Plishtim. Midbarim, from the border and from the desert. Ad Anor, until the Euphrates River. Ki etem biyetchem, I will deliver to you the inhabitants of the land, and you will drive them out before you. Rashi, Veshati, what does the word Veshati mean? What I will give. Vahatov, the word the tav and the word Veshati mudgeshes has a dot in it, because it's coming under the word, because it's the second under 2, meaning the basic word should have been, it's instead of 2 tavs. So instead of putting 2 tavs, he puts a dot in the tav. So therefore you have Vishati. She'ein shisa b'lo saf, because the word shisa, setting, is really with a saf. Achas l'shimush, one is to tell me what it's telling me about. They tell me if it's a past, present, or future. And therefore he puts over here Vishati instead of placing 2 safs. Adanar, until the river. Which river are we referring to? Pras, this is the Euphrates River. As we see, this is mentioned already in the book of Genesis, telling us the borders. V'geidash tamoi means usagarshem, and you will chase them away, drive them out. Verse 32, you shall not make a covenant with them or with their gods. Verse 33, you shall not dwell in your land. They shall not dwell in your land. because they are going to make you sin against me, because you might serve their gods, and they will be as a stumbling block for you, a snare to you. If you would come to serve them, will be for you as a stumbling block. This key in this case means because then, that if so too we find in many different places. This is, as we mentioned many times, that the word key has 4 different ways how it can be interpreted and explained. So too asher, so too the word im, if, can also be asher, that that when you will bring the bikurim offering, that is an obligation. It's not if a person decides he wants to bring it. So it's when you will bring it. So the word im can also be when, and as we see over here, as when it's talking about when because they will cause you. The word ki and im, as he shows how the translation of those words are interchangeable in many different places. Chapter 24, verse 1. Vel Moshe Omar. Now that he finished about the account of the rational side of the laws of the Torah, over here, going back to on the 4th of Sivan, God has told Moses about the giving of the Torah. Vel Moshe Omar, and to Moshe he says, Alei al Hashem, go up to God. Ata you v'Aaron and Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, v'Shiva b'Tziknei Yisrael, and the 70 of the elders of the Jewish people, v'Yishtachavitza merachik, and you will bow from a distance. Vel Moshe Omar, when is this talking about? So as we mentioned, according to Rashi's opinion, the Torah is not in chronological order. So this Torah reading was said, before the 10 Commandments that we learned in the previous Torah reading in Parshas Yisrael. And what date was it? On the 4th of Sivan, God told him to come up. Verse 2, Moses alone will be the one who will come close to God. But they should not draw near. That means the other people that he said can go up the mountain should not. And the people themselves, should not even go up to the mountain at all with him. To that dark cloud, Moshe was the only one that was going to go there. Everybody else will stand back. Verse 3. Vayave Moshe, and Moshe came Vayisaper Lam, and he told the people, "Let's call David Hashem everything that God had commanded. Vayis kol Mishpatim, and all the laws and all the commandments. Vayan kol ha'am, and all the people respond. The entire people responded. Koil echad, in one voice, with one voice. Vayomeru, and they said, Kol advarim asher diber Hashem, all the words that God has spoken to us, Nasa, we will do. Vayavi Moshe, Rashi says, Vayavi Moshe, Vayisaper la'am, bayim, that exact day, when Moshe came down from the mountain, it's called Divrei Hashem, everything that God said, which was mitzvah sprisha, the mitzvah that they have to separate from their wives and they have to consider being holy, the hagbala, and staying away from the mountain. V'skala Mishpatim, what are all the commandments that he said? Sheva mitzvahs shenitztavu b'nei Noach, the 7 Noachite commandments, as well as those commandments that were given to them already in Mara, which were Shabbos, Kibbud Avayim, Parah, Duma, and Dinin, the Shabbos and honoring your parents, and the laws of the red heifer, and the laws of monetary obligations. Shenitnu lahem in Mara, these were already given to them in Mara prior to the giving of the Torah. Verse 4, Vayichtev Moshe kol divrei Hashem, and Moshe then wrote down all the words of God. Vayashkim ba'boker, and he got up early in the morning. Vayivem Mizbeach, and he built an altar tachas ahar at the bottom of the mountain, at the foot of the mountain. Ushtei mesrim atzeva, and he then made 12 different monuments. L'shnei masar shiftei Yisrael, for the 12 tribes of Israel. Vayichtev Moshe, what does it mean that he's talking about that he wrote? What did he write if the Torah hasn't yet been given? Mimreishis vad matan Torah, from the beginning of the book of Genesis until the giving of the Torah. Because of mitzvah shenitztavu b'Mara, and those commandments that were already given in Mara. And that's what Moshe continues later, and he calls it the Book of the Covenant. Vayashkem b'boker, he's up early in the morning. What day are we on now? This is the 5th of Sivan, the day before the giving of the Torah. Vayikach Moshe chatzi adam. Verse 5. Vayishlach es nari b'nei Yisrael, and he then dispatched the young men of the Jewish people. Vayalu elus, and they offered offerings. Vayizbechu zvachim, and they sacrificed bulls as peace offerings. Shlomim Lashem Parim, they brought as bulls peace offerings to Hashem. Vesnare, who are these youngsters? These are the Bechayros, the firstborn, that they were going to be the ones to work in the Holy Temple until the sin of the golden calf. Verse 6, Vayikach Moshe Chatzi Adam, and Moshe then took half of the blood that was there, and he then put it into two large bowls, Vayosim Ba'agonis, and put it into two large bowls. Chatzi Adam, and half of the blood, Zorek ala Mizbeach, he threw against the altar. This was part of him doing, as we're soon going to see, the different sacrificial rites that were done. Rashi explains, Vayikach Moshe Chatzi Adam. What does it mean? Why doesn't it say that he just split it into half? Who is the one that split it for him? An angel came and split it for him. So he just took the half of blood. However, an angel was the one that split it for him. Ba'agonis, what are agonis? Shnei agonis, two bowls that would hold the blood. Echad l'chatzi dam oila, the echad l'chatzi dam shlamim. One bowl was for the blood of the ascent offering, and one was for the peace offering. Lahazis isam alaam, that he was going to eventually sprinkle it on the people. From here our rabbis have learned that with this the Jewish people have entered the covenant in three things: b'milah, with the circumcision; tefillah, the immersion; v'hazaz damim, and the sprinkling of blood. Even though it doesn't say clearly about the sprinkling and the circumcision, but later on by Joshua we know that they said that they were circumcised at the time of the exodus of Egypt in order for them to enjoy part of the Paschal offering. They had to be circumcised as well. We don't know, it doesn't say clearly, but we know that they have immersed as well. Ein hazah b'lei tefillah. The reason is because one cannot be sprinkled with the blood from a sacrifice if he has not first immersed. So it must be that Moshe brought them into the covenant through the actual sprinkling of the blood, and they must have immersed in a mikveh beforehand. Sefer Habris. We continue, verse 7. Vayikach Sefer Habris, and he took the book of the covenant, Vayikra Bosniam, and he read it to the people, in the ears, that they should all hear it. Vayemru, and they said, and they responded, Koil asher diber Hashem, whatever God said, Naseh v'nishma, we will do, and we will listen. And we will learn everything that God told us. Sefer Habris, what does it mean, the book of the covenant? Rashi explains, from Bereshis, as we mentioned before, from the beginning of the book of Genesis until the giving of the Torah, the mitzvahs b'Morah, and the mitzvahs that they were told in Morah. Verse 8, Vayikach Moshe Adam, and Moshe then took the blood, Vayizrek ala'am, and he sprinkled it on the people, Vayemer, and he said, Hine dam habris, behold, this is the blood of the covenant, Asher kodesh Hashem imachem, that God is making with you, Al kol hadvarim ha'ela, regarding all these words that I teach you today with the Ten Commandments. Vayizrek, what does it mean that he threw? Einyan hazah means that he sprinkled, as it says, what the Targum explains, uzrak al midbech al like he sprinkled it on the altar to atone for the Jewish people. Verse 9. Vayal Moshe v'Aaron, and at that point Moshe and Aaron ascended and went up. Nadav and Avihu, v'shivim miziknei Yisrael, and the 70 elders of the Jewish people, as we mentioned before, that they were going to go up in a distance of where Moshe is to bow to Hashem. Verse 10, Vayiru es Elokei Yisrael, as Moshe entered a cloud, then the Jewish people, then they had a vision of God. V'sachas raglav, and beneath his feet, Kimase livnes hasaper, was there like the likeness of a brick of sapphire, uke'etzam hashamayim lotoyer, and the appearance like the clearness of the heaven. What does this mean? Rashi explains. Rashi says as follows: Vayira es Elokei Yisrael. This is going back on Nadav and Avihu and the elders that he spoke about in the previous verse. Nistaklu, they looked, v'hitzitzu, and they were able to get a glance into the cloud of where Moshe went. And because of this, nischayvu misa, they were liable of the capital punishment. God did not want to ruin the joy of accepting the Torah. He waited until the day that they were celebrating the tabernacle, and that's when Nadav and Avihu died, and they brought then a incense and a sacrifice which they were not meant to, and at that point they were killed as well. Viliskenim, And when it came to the elders, they died at the time with the sin of the complainers. Because it says that as the Jewish people were complaining, God's wrath came amongst the people in the camp, and it consumed the people at the edge of the camp. What does it mean, the edge? The word katzeh can also mean katzinim, like elders, like the generals that were in the camp. What did they envision? They saw a vision that was beneath, like the likeness of a brick of sapphire. So Rashi explains, what does this mean? This type of this type of sapphire would look like a brick. This was by God during the time of when the Jewish people were enslaved with back-breaking labor in Egypt. This was because to remember and to always be conscious of the pain and suffering the Jewish people were going through. That they were working with back-breaking labor with making bricks, and that's why God had this brick of sapphire by his throne. And this is now the stone is showing. The next thing was, once the Jewish people were able to be released from Egypt, redeemed from Egypt, there was light and joy before God, like the clearness of the sky of the heavens, of the cloudness of the heavens. What does it mean, ke'etzem? Loshin mara, like the vision that they saw. L'toyar, the word l'toyar doesn't necessarily mean pure, but like pure gold, one would say it's clear, you can see it. Loshin bar v'tzar, it was clear, you were able to see what it was, and it was clear, the appearance was how clear it was. Verse 11. Velatzile b'nei Yisrael. Yet Hashem did not raise his hands against the nobles of the Jewish people. He did not raise his hands. And he didn't punish them at the moment, even though they were technically liable of capital punishment, as we just mentioned in Rashi. They saw, they gazed upon the divine. They ate and they drank. Rashi, Velatzile, what does it mean to these individuals? Who were they? And the 70 elders, who they were considered the greatest of the Jewish people. He didn't punish them. Miklal, from here we learn, they should have been worthy of being punished, but God did not, and he waited, as we mentioned earlier. They saw God and they ate and they drank. That there was a lack of respect, that while they were eating and drinking, they were watching a movie of what God was all about. And the lack of respect. That's the way the Medrash explains it. But Unklus does not explain it this way. And he says as follows. Atzile, the word Atzile, and Unklus explains it a different way, talking about the God is coming to tell us his praise. Rashi adds, when you look at the word Atzile, Loshin Gedolim, it means great. 6 amas of the greatness, meaning big ones. So the word Atzile refers to big, great, noble. Verse 12. And God said to Moshe, this is on the 7th of Sivan, following the giving of the Torah. Now God tells Moses to go down the mountain. God tells him, God says to Moses, come up to me. Come up to me on the mountain. And remain there for 40 days. I will give to you as luchas evan, these tablets of stone, Torah and the Torah, mitzvah and the commandments, asher kasafti le'roisam, that I have written down for the people instruction. Rashi explains this is la'achar matan Torah. After God gave the commandments, after the giving of the Torah, God tells Moshe, you come up and stay there for how long? For 40 days. What does this mean that God is telling him he's going to give him the tablets? Meaning, I'm now going to give you the 613 commandments, which within the 10 commandments, we're part of the 10 commandments. Rabbi Sadia Gaon, one of the great scholars, when he made his commandments, he made a book of the 613 commandments. He was able to find and connect, he was able to connect the 613 commandments to every single one of the cardinal or original 10 commandments. Meaning when God gave Moshe the 10 commandments, within it were the 613, and for the next 40 days he was going to study with him what those commandments are. Verse 13. Vayakam Moshe vayishua mirsharsei. And Moshe then arose and Yeshua's attendant. Vayal Moshe el har Elikim, and Moshe ascended to the mountain of God. Vayakam Moshe vayishua mirsharsei. Lo yadaiti, Rashi says, I don't know, mat tivish el Yeshua kan. Where does Yeshua show up here? V'oimerani, how is it? Because how does Yeshua come here? Because if God only told Moshe himself to come up to the mountain, we don't find anywhere else that Yeshua was told. So therefore Rashi says, that a student with escort was there as Moshe's assistant, and therefore he walked with them until he was allowed to go until the perimeter of the mountain. He was not allowed to go anywhere afterwards. Misham, and then from there, Moshe went up himself to the mountain of God. Yeshua situated himself right at the foot of the mountain. Then he's Akif Sham, he waited there. All the 40 days. Because we find when Moshe came down the mountain later on, we will learn in Parshas Kisisa, and he sees what's happening with the golden calf. And Yeshua is the one that hears the Jewish people, what they're doing. What would that tell us? Yeshua wasn't with them. Because Yeshua stayed by the mountain, the Jewish people moved away already. And all the 40 days, he stayed there at the foot of the mountain in his tent. Verse 14. The Elas came unto the elders. Amar, he said, Shvu lanu bazeh. You wait for us here. Ad asher nashuv aleichem, until we return to you. Va'ahine Aaron v'chur imachem. And behold, Aaron and Chur will be with you, are here with you. Mi bal dvarim yigash aleim. And who has a lawsuit should approach, meaning if you cannot decide, you should approach them. What does this mean? He says as follows. Rashi says, the Elas Kenim, B'tzeisim in Amachna. He told them when he comes out of the camp that Yeshua himself was the one that escorted Moshe until the mountain. Everybody else waited. Now you stay with everybody else in the camp. You stay with them. Don't worry about us where we're going to be. Why do you have to stay with the people? Because you have to be there. Let's say if people have questions, you have to judge them, you have to help them out, and that's why you got to be there. Who's this fellow Chur? Benashal Miriam. This was the son of Miriam, the sister of Moshe. Aviv Kalev ben Yefuna. His father was Kalev ben Yefuna, who married Miriam. As it says, that it says that Kalev married a woman by the name of Ephras. Who was Ephras? That was Miriam. As it's explained in the tractate of Sota, they had a son by the name of Chur. Chur was Moshe's nephew from his sister's son. Mi baldvarim. What does this mean? Who has words? Meaning, mi if somebody has a lawsuit, he has a problem, he has issues that they got to talk to somebody that's going to help them out to be able to tell them what should be done. That would be why the elders have to then go and be back with the people in the camp. Verse 15. Vayal Moshe lahar. And Moshe then ascended up to the mountain, Vayechasa anan es ha'ar, and the cloud covered the mountain. Verse 16, Vayishkin kveid Hashem, and the glory of God rested al har Sinai, on Mount Sinai. Vayechaseu ha'anan, and the cloud covered, which the cloud covered for it, sheishas yamim, 6 days. Vayikral Moshe, and he called to Moshe, Vayom hashvi, on the 7th day, miteich ha'anan, from the midst of the clouds. These, what we're referring to here, is the first 7 days of the 40-day period that Moshe was on the mountain. Rashi, Vayechaseu anan, Rabbeinu cholkim adavar. Our rabbis have a dispute about what's going on over here. Which 6 days are we referring to? Some of them say some say this is the first 6 days from the 1st of Sivan until Shavuos. The day of the Torah, which then it says that the cloud covered the mountain. There are others that say that this is the other 6 days, the first 6 of the 40 days. Vayikral Moshe, and he called Moshe, Vayom hashvi, on the 7th day, Loimer Aser Dibris, to tell him the 10 Commandments. Moshe v'chol b'nei Yisrael imdim, all Moshe and all, according to the opinion that we said before, that all the Jewish people, that the Torah was given on the 7th of Sivan, Moshe v'chol b'nei Yisrael imdim, all the Jewish people and Moshe were standing there to receive the Torah. The Torah gives honor and respect to Moshe, and therefore only Moshe mentions Moshe's name. Now to the second opinion that we mentioned before, which 6 days are we referring to? Some people say, when was the cloud covered? For the 6 days after the 10 Commandments were given. This was done in the first 40 days of Moshe going up to the mountain to accept the 10 Commandments. And it's coming to teach us, any person who would go into the camp of the divine presence, for example, like the high priest who would go into the holy temple on Yom Kippur, needed 6 days of separation before you can go into the holy place. That's why the high priest on Yom Kippur, also a week before Yom Kippur, was separated. So to over here, Moshe for 6 days prior going into the cloud, and where the cloud covered was for 6 days, and only then did he continue on. And did God call him. Verse 17, Umari kveid Hashem, and the eyes of what the Jewish people saw, what they envisioned, was as follows. Umari kveid Hashem, the appearance of the glory of God, ki eishei chelos, like a consuming fire, b'reisha har, on the top of the mountain, la'ini b'nei Yisrael. That's what the Jewish people saw from the bottom of the mountain. Rashi. No Rashi. Yavei Moshe b'seicha anan. And Moshe then entered into the cloud, into the smoke cloud. Vayala lahar, and he ascended to the top of the mountain. Vayi Moshe b'har, and Moshe was on the mountain. Arboim yoim, 40 days. Varboim loila, and 40 nights. B'seicha anan. Anan zeh, this cloud, can mean oshanu, is like a cloud of smoke. V'osalei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God did this. L'Moshe shvil b'seicha. God made a path that he should be able to walk through without being hurt or affected by the smoke and the cloud that was there. This concludes the 7th Torah reading of Parshas Mishpatim.